It was just over 16 years ago that I joined this industry as an executive. But truth be told, I've been around as a fan and as a player for so much longer. Video games continue to innovate, not only as entertainment, but also into areas far more profound. I may no longer be an executive in this industry, but I'll always be an ambassador for video games as a force for good and a force for fun.
I still find it hard to believe that another decade has come and gone. It just hasn't sunk in yet. 10 years is simply an itty bitty speck of time, all things considered, but for a teeny feeble little human like me, that's a long freaking time. I've accomplished and grown quite a lot over that amount of time, and most prominently played so many video games that I grew a bigger appreciation for the medium as a whole. I was gonna limit this to a simple top 10 and rank what I consider my games of the years, but it felt so wrong leaving out as many titles as I did. Heck, a big chunk of the video was listing honorable mentions, so why not just reflect on my favorite games of the decade as a whole? Of course, with a special focus on my games of each year. I'm sure I'm leaving a few titles out, being that there were simply too many games I played to keep track of, but I did my best. Go easy on me. Only thing to keep note of here is that I'm going by these games' Western release dates, because I honestly couldn't care less if and when they were released in other regions. I couldn't play them. But that's it. Just a chill video, really, and an excuse to gush about a lot of my favorite games. As you can see by the video length, I've got a lot of topics to discuss and not a lot of time to talk about them, so let's cut formalities and talk about my favorite games of the decade. I remember quite a bit about the beginning of the decade. It was one of my personal favorite years of gaming in retrospect. Sonic Colors, Super Mario Galaxy 2, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, I could go on. So, I will. Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, Mega Man 10, Super Meat Boy, Catherine, and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Good lord, what a lineup of games. A 3D Sonic that focused on tightening the better half of the previous entry, an expansion on arguably the best 3D Mario, my first ever indie game, and one of my favorite fighting games ever made. And a special mention goes out to my baby Soul Silver, because I'd feel a little weird if a remake of a game that was released before 2010 ended up as my favorite game of the year. If anything, let's call this a tie with what I ended up picking. It's still what I consider to be Pokemon at its best and purest, and I don't know if this game will ever be topped for me, and that's perfectly fine in my book. All excellent games we have here, making for a very solid year in gaming, but my game of the year would have to be the visual novel masterpiece, 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors. As you can see, the game has been remastered in HD for the PS4 and Steam, although the game was originally released in 2010 on the DS, which was how I originally played. I highly recommend sticking with the HD version regardless, due to it looking leagues better and having full voice acting to make the characters and scenes come to life that much more. Either way, you're in for the same shocking, edge-of-your-seat thriller mystery that I still think about to this day. If the DS version were the only version, it'd still be my game of the year, so take that as you will. Everyone in the cast is there for a reason, intriguing the player on top of their colorful personalities and dynamics. Twists keep coming at you, the game never feels like it drags as you're constantly moving forward, getting answers, then getting more questions on top of those answers. There are multiple endings, with the game's bigger picture requiring you to get some, if not all, of the game's conclusions, but it never becomes tiresome due to the game's perfect length and design choices to help streamline subsequent playthroughs. Coupled together with plenty of puzzles that'll get you to scratch your head on multiple occasions and a soundtrack that's low-key a bop, 999 was a fantastic start to a blooming series, an excellent game on its own, and an experience I'd recommend anyone get into, whether you're a fan of visual novels or not. You may be surprised. This year was no slouch when it came to game releases as well, which only helped my appreciation for gaming that much more. We got the surprisingly solid Mario and Sonic London games, Kirby's Return to Dreamland, Sonic freaking Generations, and Terraria. These two in particular are some of my favorite entries in the respective series that I still come back to every now and then, and this one's slowly but surely been growing on me the more I played it. This was also the year the 3DS was released, and while its launch was bad, we still ended up getting a couple of great entries such as Mario Kart 7, Super Mario 3D Land, and Ocarina of Time 3D. All excellent additions to the library for what would eventually become one of my favorite handhelds. 3 great first year titles for the system, but how ironic is it that my game of the year lies on the system before it? I'm about 99% sure that the Nintendo DS is my favorite console in all of gaming. I love this thing so much, and can make a whole video listing reasons why that is. One of said reasons is how it treated Pokemon. As I said this before and I'll say it again, Pokemon as a franchise franchise peaked on the DS, and it'll probably never reach that status for me ever again. Need proof? Just take a look at my game of 2011, Pokemon White. This is one of my favorite Pokemon games for so many reasons. The way it pushed the already great sprite work from the previous gen made everything from the NPCs to the Pokemon themselves feel more alive is so respectable and remarkable even today. This game's graphics aged like fine wine, and with a soundtrack that's as dynamic as it is filled with personality, the game presents itself on a silver platter. Along with faster gameplay that's been tweaked to be more fun and competitive than ever with some interesting new ideas in Pokemon, the game delivers a narrative that makes you think about the world this series worked so hard to establish in order to tell a tale that would only hit as hard as it did if told in this world. The cast of characters remains my favorite, with such excellent personalities like your rival buddies, Juniper, and N, who may just be my favorite out of the whole franchise. All across the board, this game made you care, and with the risks it took to push these games to their very limit, I still think about and love it dearly. Without a doubt, the shining star of a pretty clean year. Ah yes, the year the world was supposed to end. In all honesty, I find this to be among the stronger years in gaming. For starters, we have my absolute favorite kart racer Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, followed by Dream Drop Distance, Tales of Grace's F, Pokemon White 2, Virtue's Last Reward, and the release of the Wii U. Two of these games I have sort of a love-hate relationship with, but as a result, they're two of the games I'm most passionate about, and I feel that speaks volumes. White 2 and VLR are just dope as hell. Good lord, these games are awesome. But as for the Wii U, it eventually became what I believe to be an underappreciated console, but its launch was rough in many aspects. We'll be seeing some great games from it in the following years, but this ain't one of them unless you want to count All-Stars Racing Transformed. Despite the rough start, it's a pretty good console in my eyes. Anyway, with all these great games, including 2 sequels to my previous 2 games of past years, what could have beat them out? Admittedly, it wasn't a fair contest because Xenoblade Chronicles is one of the best games I've ever played. This game was originally released over in Japan back in 2010, so the game took its sweet time coming to the West. Heck, we didn't even think we'd get the game, but the fan demand was there and the game delivered more than we were expecting. Maybe Nintendo held off on Xenoblade because they knew we weren't ready for the masterpiece to hit store shelves. I mean, they were right. We weren't ready and didn't deserve this game. I don't know why they're bothering to give us the game in HD. We still haven't recovered, but if they didn't end the world in 2012, might as well do it in 2020. The story grips you from the very start and has one of the strongest openings out of any video game. And I don't just mean that first scenario with our boy Dunbound, but the events that send this journey into motion. Somehow, some way, the game only needs a couple of hours to get you to fall in love with its cast. Without realizing it, you're hooked and the game never lets go. You join the characters on an epic, spanning an immersive world filled with different races, rules, and customs, making for some spectacular world building. Regardless of if the game should have been on something more powerful than the Wii, which it will pretty soon, the genius art design and scaling of the environments you traverse through make you forget about it all in the moment. Not to mention that for a while, this game had my absolute favorite soundtrack in all of gaming. The gameplay may take some getting used to, heck, it just might not be your cup of tea, but for what it sets out to be, it succeeds requiring on-the-spot strategizing and team synergy, that of which is made easier if you take the time to get to know them outside of battle and treat them right through the game's many extra features. This is an enormous game that I'm surprised even fit on the system, and it all comes together so naturally. Not to mention it's iconic and memorable as all heck, even if you just play through it once. So many standout moments and scenarios will stick with you forever, making the game an instant classic. One whose legacy I hope lives on for as long as the industry is alive because it did a lot and succeeded at just about everything. Its only real problem for me was its visuals, and that's getting fixed later on this year. There's no such thing as a perfect game, but my dudes, this one got real close. This year was an alright one for gaming, definitely a step down from the past 3 years looking back on it. This decade had a pretty good start. There were some cool releases though, like the Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 remix, oh my goodness, and Wind Waker HD. The former fulfilled one of my biggest gaming wishes by allowing me to finally get my dirty hands on all the Final Mix exclusive content, and the latter was the most fun I've ever had with a Zelda game. In terms of original titles, I'd also like to give a shout out to Super Mario 3D World and Fire Emblem Awakening. Two great games, with one introducing me to what would become my favorite Nintendo franchise and one of my favorite franchises of all time. Oh, and the PS4 released this year, and that thing's awesome. No games were represented this year, but wait. Just wait. As for my game of the year, it was almost Awakening, but as anyone watching my channel knows, I am, and forever will be, Tales trash. So don't be too shocked when I say that Tales of Xillia took the 2013 crown from me, because I love this game even more after replaying it this past year. Your boy made a whole video analysis on this game, and if you love me like I love you, you'll give it a watch, wink wink. What's that? No, you won't watch this video and instead will just listen to me talk about it in a much shorter time span here and now? Well, fine, jerk. The story is one of my favorites, and while it unfortunately lost a bit of its footing around the end, that doesn't hamper my enjoyment too much. The whole dual protagonist thing was a neat idea too. Definitely picked Jude first despite how tempting cuteanimegirl.png is, but even having the option to choose and seeing the story from two entirely different perspectives was awesome. If anything, it'll make for one heck of a second playthrough. Both characters ended up being among my favorites in the series that built itself on the foundation of excellent characters, so take that as you will. The music is stellar, and the battle system is one of my favorites for being fast and energetic. Linking with other party members opens the gate for some unique strategies, linked arts were tight, and every character was a blast to play as thanks to the game cleaning up mechanics from past entries while introducing new ones. This is still what I'd consider to be the best starting point in the franchise for how expertly it meshes newer combat systems with those of the older titles, and while it isn't as accessible as something like my baby girl Vesperia, I think the gameplay really sells this one as a nice segue from the old to the new and into the series in general. Plus, it's a great game and my favorite to have come out this year, so there's that too. This is one of my favorite years for gaming, probably second only to one other year this decade that we'll get to eventually. We were given another good set of HD collections with Kingdom Hearts 2.5 and Tales of Symphonia Chronicles. Then of course there are a ton of great original titles, and very strong ones too. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Mario Kart 8, 2 Smash games for both of Nintendo's current consoles, Danganronpa 1, Danganronpa 2, Freedom Planet, Shovel Knight, and my boy Gunvolt's first game. So much, and a ton of quality to boot, making for another really tough year. What a lineup! Special mention to all the incredibly solid 2D platformers. If you didn't know, that's my favorite genre behind JRPGs due to me growing up almost exclusively on those games, and this year kept me well fed. Combined with a phenomenal racing game, my gateway into another series to drool over as well as a new genre for me entirely, and 2 freaking Smash games? How am I expected to choose my game of the year? I mean, that's what I would ask myself. But I'm Tails trash. Tales of Exilia was great, but Tales of Exilia 2? Tales of Exilia 2? I love this game, and I'm glad I replayed it this past year to truly understand why. But first things first, I can see why a lot of people don't care for the game. The pacing's all weird thanks to the debt system, and there are a lot of strange gameplay choices like party locking outside of towns and dividing the game story into chapters the way it did. Not to mention there's a lot of retreading old ground, but gosh darn it, the game tried something new and it worked for me. I don't care about the story's pacing because it's forcing me to do all its side activities, explore the world, and get acquainted with the worlds of Rise Maxia and Olympios. I found myself falling in love with the game's locations that much more because I had to explore them a lot more, and instead of getting annoyed, I was having fun. I was being rewarded with more gold than I knew what to do with, so what's an in-game paywall anyway? All my original Exilia babies are still fun to play as, and now there are 3 more characters to play as? Hello? Optional character quests shoot this game's cast up that much higher. The battle system I already loved in Exilia is expanded upon. The game's harder but in a fair manner, and it wasn't rushed! The game feels like it has that extra polish and love put into a Tales game like I expect, and the post-game is one of, if not the biggest in the series. It's a JRPG that has a lot to offer, and I get that having it all forced on you can be annoying, but just enjoy the ride, dude. Play the game the way it wants you to for a change, and let it surprise you. I know it surprised me, and the game's only given me more reasons to love Tales. From one of my favorite years in gaming to one of, if not my least favorite out of the decade. There were a couple of standouts, but my honorable mentions and even Game of the Year aren't in the same league as just about everything else. This year we got Tales of Zestiria, which is a whole can of worms, Persona 4 Dancing All Night, Xenoblade Chronicles X, the mastercraft that is HuniePop, and Undertale, which shook the gaming community quite a bit. I'd say all these games are decent, with Undertale leaning slightly into the greater side of the spectrum. Personally, my experience with the game was a bit dampered, but I do recognize that it's a good game and one that's earned its reputation. If that game isn't my game of the year though, then what is? Well, it would have to be the original Super Mario Maker. I love me some classic 2D Mario action just as much as the other guy, so having a game where people across the globe make levels for just that and a seemingly endless pool of possibilities and content is only a formula for success. The tools available at your disposal still gives you a ton of options and creative freedom to make the Mario levels of your dreams, even down to which out of the major Mario gameplay styles you prefer thanks to having 4 different options. There's a sequel out there now which features even more level creation options, but I'd still say this game holds up for how seamless it is to create from the Wii U's gamepad and the original Mario's wide array of costumes for characters from the likes of Smash Bros. And other things. There was a lot of love put into this game from both the game developers and level creating players, so with the community as creative as it was and still is at Mario Maker 2, this game is awesome. Congratulations Wii U, one of your games made it as a representative for a year this past decade. Told you the console was good. That's about all I've got for 2015. I didn't mean to make it shorter than usual, but yeah, the year wasn't that good. this was another meh year in gaming, although it's a bit better than 2015 as the few honorable mentions I do have are really good. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Sharp FE, Hyper Light Drifter, Stardew Valley, and oh, this one hurt. Valhalla. TMS wasn't something I thought I'd enjoy as much as I did, but for the bit I played, it was cool. Gotta pick it up on the Switch to play it all the way through. Hyper Light Drifter and Stardew Valley are very strong indie titles that do what they set out to in spades, and the same can be said for Valhalla, but I could just go on and on about it even more. I bloody love this game so much, and it sucks that it was released in the same year as my Game of the Year because I love both games a ton for different reasons. My eventual winner just clicked with me that slightest bit more. I am, of course, referring to Gunvolt 2, baby! Fun fact, I used to think that this game was just okay. That first time through, I don't know, man, I wasn't feeling it. Maybe I was too used to games taking 40 hours to beat or something, and the short length threw me off, but when it was all said and done, I got this weird urge to replay the game, so I did. Then I did it again. And again. Without even realizing it, I had fallen in love and eventually admitted that I was head over heels for what's easily my favorite indie game ever made. Gunvolt 2 is what I believe to be 2D platforming perfection. From the story that's kinda weird but really satisfying and interesting all things considered, to the clean visuals even better thanks to the Switch's HD port, and even a nice soundtrack, everything's already pretty good. But when you put that controller or 3DS in your hand and you play the game, boy! Gunvolt and Copen both control so well. They respond instantly, move at the perfect speed, and are so capable when it comes to combat. Learning the ins and outs of these expertly designed levels, replaying the game in its stages over and over, mastering the mechanics, and being rewarded with extra materials for new equipment that open the gameplay capabilities that much more while getting to listen to Super Duper Ultimate J-Pop sung by Lumen and Lola for both campaigns. My god, it's so good! This is a game that delivers a satisfying experience over just one playthrough, but truly has so much more to offer when you decide to give it more of your time and master it. With some amazing post-game content to top it all off, delivering even more, I still find myself playing through the game again and again with it offering me more every time. What you put in is what you get out of it, and master with an already phenomenal game that first time through, I don't know how NT's ever gonna top this. Well, I mean, I have given suggestions in another video, wink wink. And here we are, everyone, my favorite year of the decade. Man, what a year, what a year! Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2, Mighty Gunvolt Burst, Doki Doki Literature Club, Fire Emblem Warriors, Shadows of Valentia, Nier Automata, and then some of my favorite games ever, such as Sonic Mania, Danganronpa V3, Tales of Berseria, and Super Mario Odyssey. That's 10 whole games, all in one year that stood out to me. Just me. Outside of my little bubble, there were even more big boys, and I still can't believe I kept up with it all as well as I did. Oh, and speaking of Odyssey, this was the year that the Nintendo Switch was released. I love this console so much. It's one of my personal favorites due to concept alone. How fitting that it came out in a year like this. All these games have something about them that made them stand out, whether it was how they made me feel things for a multitude of reasons, their pure entertainment, and a lot of these were excellent entries in various franchises I love. Japanese gaming fans dined like royalty this year, and it was awesome. But it feels like I'm forgetting something, some sort of huge JRPG in what's become one of my favorite franchises. Ah, of course, my game of the year. Persona 5, baby! This is a masterpiece and one of the best games I've ever played. This game's praises have been sung for years on end, and it's crazy to think about how this game is almost 3 years old and still being talked about like it came out yesterday. It shook the gaming industry with all its bold moves, like what it means to have a great user interface, how a unique soundtrack can give the game a vibe all its own, and it shows that games can be the longest things ever without feeling like the longest things ever. Persona 5 features a gripping narrative that's an experience through and through, one that I never found myself wanting to end. I was so in love with all its story themes, conflicts, and especially its cast. I get frustrated with how little time there is to focus on these characters in the story because they're so intriguing, so good. All of the Phantom Thieves, each and every one of them are amazing, and it's criminal that I only get one in-game year to spend with them. The game's turn-based, but because of how fast-paced, responsive, and stylized it is, it doesn't feel like that, allowing for anyone to have fun with this one. The dungeons are well designed, there's a lot of possible customization in terms of how you build your characters in different personas, the life simulation gives the player a lot more breathing room in how they spend their time, and there's a lot of love poured into every ounce, every crevice of this game. Persona 5 is a great JRPG, a great video game, a great representative of what this form of media can provide. I praised it many times and most likely will praise it many more because it's a game that makes me proud to call myself a Persona fan and a gamer. All in all, I think it's safe to say this is my game of the decade, and how fitting that I came from my favorite year of the decade. After the 365-day party we had in 2017, I was prepared to go back to normal the following year because there was just no way that something could top 2017. Sure enough, yeah, this year was pretty average, but that's okay. We had some cool games, like The World Ends With You Final Remix doing one of my top 3 favorite games total justice, Mega Man 11 bringing the Blue Bomber back to gaming after almost a whole ass decade, Deltarune giving me a more satisfying experience than its successor, and one that wasn't ruined for me this time, thanks for that Toby, and Celeste for pushing the quality of an already excellent genre even further with how well it meshes gameplay and story. Such a good game. Why didn't it win again? Oh, Smash Ultimate. Perfect name, by the way, is a celebration of not just Nintendo, but video games as a whole, and in the best way possible. Having time to play it more, sit on it, and really think about everything it did, I can confidently say that this is my favorite Smash game that's only gotten better over time. There's a good amount of fun modes to try out, the soundtrack is bigger and better than ever before, we're still getting more characters added to the roster, and the gameplay is the best out of them all. The weight, feel, feedback, speed, balance, everything is straight out of this world. It follows the phrase easy to learn yet tough to master in spades, making for a game that's crazy accessible and rewarding when given the time to learn its mechanics. This roster has grown to be one of the biggest in fighting game history, so it's unbelievable how balanced the whole thing is. There are tons of varying playstyles to learn, all surrounding the same general controls, meaning you're bound to find a favorite. Mine is Palutena, and it feels so good to say that because I didn't like her at all in 4 despite her being one of my most anticipated newcomers in that game. I also really enjoy Zelda and Lucas, with some Joker thrown in there because you know I gotta represent my persona. This stormed its way up my most played Switch games, and for good reason. It's addicting, well put together, and a game that can easily put a smile on my face when I'm not playing too competitively online. I can get pretty heated. Finally, we come to the past year. I won't be spending too much time here because I just made a video talking about not only some of the games I played last year that released before, but also a few of the games of 2019. So if you're looking for a bit more, watch that video. Seriously, please watch it, I need your validation. Luminous Avenger X, while a somewhat average Gunvolt game, is still a Gunvolt game at the end of the day, so it has a lot of dope game design choices, great levels with responsive controls, and an emphasis on skill mastery, just the way I like it. It also got some visual upgrades, being that it was made specifically for consoles, and that's always a plus. Kingdom Hearts 3 was a good Kingdom Hearts game that's only gotten better with time, featuring massive worlds, plenty of additions to combat, and some of, if not the best presentation in the series, from its jaw-dropping visuals to the phenomenal soundtrack. I, of course, can't move on without at least mentioning Vesperia Definitive Edition, an enhanced port of my favorite game ever made. Again, it'd feel weird putting a remake of a game released before the 2010s as my game of the year, but I wanted to bring it up because it's my favorite game. And on the Switch too? Can I get a hell yeah? I'd also like to give a shout out to classic JRPG re-releases like Trials of Mana, Grandia HD, and Star Ocean First Departure R. Regardless of my feelings towards them, it's just nice that game developers have been recognizing the importance of preserving their titles while making them as accessible as possible. For those who watched that video, I begged you to give a peek, or know me at all, you wouldn't be too surprised that my game of 2019 is easily Fire Emblem Three Houses. I can't sing this game's praises enough. It's a masterpiece. The story commentates on war along with some corruption and higher systems that build the world this game invests you in, all with a personal touch thanks to getting attached to this cast of characters like never before in a Fire Emblem game. You'll find out a lot about the students of whichever house you picked, and more if you decide to recruit, all having excellent dialogue thanks to the masterful characterization and fully voiced scenes bringing them to life. The soundtrack is very different than the series norm, but works surprisingly well and heightens whatever's going on in the game. What, you don't cry to drum and bass? Yeah. Me neither. The gameplay is the typical stuff we know and love from the strategy RPG franchise, but with a lot of new bells and whistles to add to the ocean of potential tactical capabilities. Battalions, combat skills, different classes, how you grow your characters, all that jazz allows for near endless replayability and customization, truly letting the player deal with the game's challenges the way they want. With all this in mind, the game is giving me an even harder time on deciding what my favorite Fire Emblem is. Yes, I know, I thought I settled on Path of Radiance too, but Blazing Sword is just too darn good, and Three Houses is excellent in its own right. This series just has too many great games, okay? The game will have you drowning in content, so if you've got a Switch, get Three Houses. If you don't, save up, buy one, then buy Three Houses. And pick Golden Deer. All this reflecting on gaming has made me realize just how much my relationship with this side of entertainment has changed and evolved over time. I used to think of games as nothing more than simple distractions, but without even knowing it, they became an escape, an inspiration, and eventually, home. Three Houses ended up being the perfect cap to the decade because some of its many subject matters that stood out to me were time and change. This decade put me through a lot, both good and bad, ending on a bit of a sour note, as it's no secret that 2018 and 2019 were some of the hardest years of my life with drastic changes in many regards. A lot of it was admittedly in my control, making me feel like a failure or as if I hadn't progressed anywhere in my life, like years were wasted in a futile effort to reach dreams that are impossible for me to attain. Three Houses taught me that it was okay for things to change, that my most cherished relationships will either stay intact or recover over time if something were to ever happen, and that it's okay to move through life at different paces than everyone else. It put me at ease, and while things haven't been looking entirely up for me yet, the game reminded me to never lose hope, and if I ever needed to get my mind off things, I could always turn to the group of characters I chose to be with, the form of media I've dedicated myself to and fallen in love with, the type of entertainment that's more than just a time waster. Even if it's just for fun, games make me genuinely happy, and that's what's important. It's hard to put myself in such a vulnerable state because of how easy it is to cringe and laugh at this sort of thing. So thank you for making me feel like my voice is valued. Thank you for giving me a platform to express my adoration for gaming. And thank you for helping this gaming nerd achieve his dream of being a YouTuber with an audience. Here's to the next decade, whatever it may entail for video games or myself. I know I'll be okay now.